It's time for another best of 5 series of professional StarCraft 2, and what I got for you today is a Terran versus Protoss. Spawning here in game number 1 on Catalyst Alley and playing with the red Terran SCVs. He's from South Korea, he plays for Storm Gaming, and he goes by the nickname of GuMiho. And his opponent, spawning in the opposite corner of the map, playing with the blue Protoss probes for Team Splice, we have none other than Stats. And of course Stats is also from South Korea. Now both of these players are very accomplished when it comes to their StarCraft 2 careers. I actually just quickly looked it up. It turns out that Stats has earned roughly $262,000 in prize money alone, and GuMiho, the Terran player in this matchup, has indeed earned $162,000. Now both of them definitely very accomplished when it comes to their careers already, and they don't show any signs of slowing down just yet. As a matter of fact, Stats has won both an SSL as well as a GSL in 2017, arguably speaking the most difficult tournaments to win, outside of maybe BlizzCon, but definitely the hardest ones to win inside of South Korea, of course, the most competitive region in StarCraft 2. And while GuMiho did not quite end up winning an SSL this year, he did still end up winning a GSL. So I believe that Stats ended up winning Season 1 of the GSL, and GuMiho ended up winning Season 2. So both of them are very accomplished, they're very good at what they do, and this is going to be a Protoss versus Terran, of course, played in the new multiplayer patch of StarCraft 2. Now the multiplayer patch, there's definitely no denying that initially it was heavily in favor of the Protoss, in particular in Protoss versus Terran. I mean, even just the change to Chrono Boost made it so much more difficult for Terran players to deal with all of the hyper-aggressive pushes from Protoss. I mean, all of a sudden we saw oracles flying across the map at the 3-minute mark inside of the main base of the Terran, and while it does look like that's not going to be happening in this particular match, and it did take a little bit of fine-tuning throughout balance patches over the last couple of weeks to get it right, we are getting closer and closer to a point where Terran is going to be capable of dealing with all of the different kinds of aggression that a Protoss player can throw at them. But there's no denying in the fact that Protoss versus Terran was definitely heavily favored, and maybe still is slightly favored for the Protoss player in this series right now. We'll see though, because GuMiho of course has had some time to now adjust to all of the different strategies that he may be going up against. One of the changes, for example, is that we don't really see Terran players opening up with Reapers nearly as much anymore, because they need every single manpower that they can get to gun down their opponent's units. In particular, if they go for quick starport play, they may, for example, want to go for some Marines to try and deal a little bit of damage, but also if the opponent is opening up with Oracles, you need every man that you can get. Now apparently though, we see Stats going for a Stalker based opener. He's already got 2 moving across the map. First one, however, has already made its way towards the other side. He will be able to pick up 1 SCV kill very, very rapidly, and I think that this Marine may be in a little bit of trouble as well. No Cyclone follow-up here from GuMiho just yet, but Hellions are still going to be capable of dealing quite a little bit of damage, and of course they're going to be able to outrun, or I guess outright, these Stalkers here as well. 2 SCVs now pulled off the line, and look at that, he's going to be able to repair that one up. Brilliant micro there by the Terran player, making sure that he does not lose any unnecessary units, and so far it does look like he's managed to deflect this aggression here from his opponent for the time being at the very least. Another Stalker though will be joining this party in just a second, but already both players are indeed transitioning, but I think that this Stalker may be in a little bit of trouble. Second Stalker does end up dying there as well, and the early part of the game is definitely going to go in favor right here of the Terran player. I mean, he's got a solid amount of economy, he's already dealt a little bit of damage, and now that he's got a medevac out, he can actually consider going for a counter-attack here as well. Look at that. Hellions are being repaired up. I like this one a lot. 3 Marines loaded up into the medevac, but there's already actually 5 SCV, or rather 5 Hellions here at the front, all repaired up, all good to go, and are going to start going across the map. Immortal is now getting chrono boosted out here for the Protoss player, but at this point there's no scouting of these Marines that are currently incoming just yet. This may actually be a little bit of double-pronged harassment. Look at that. Stalkers are now forced to be baited away from their base, and that means that all of a sudden these Marines are going to be capable of dealing some damage here inside of the main base of the Protoss player. Probes are going to go down very, very rapidly. Immortals and, well, I guess the Stalkers for now are going to be there, but hold that thought, because apparently the Stalkers are going to once again be forced to deal with all of these Hellions. Line up the probes. Here we go. They're gonna go down in just a matter of seconds. Probes just simply get so much damage taken right there. Look at this. In just a matter of seconds, we see 15, maybe even 16 probes there going down. Hellion still in the main base as well. It eventually will get taken care of. But there is no denying that Terran is significantly ahead here in the earlier part of the game when it comes to the economy. Such a cute little move, right? But if you lose the first 2 Stalkers for what was essentially just 1 Marine and then 1 SCV as well, that's not enough damage, and the Terran player is gonna be able to capitalize on that advantage very, very quickly. Now, this is not game over yet, though. We still see a lot of units here for the Protoss. I mean, supply-wise, there's no denying that they are pretty much dead even. War Prism is now also available, so with some pickup micro and some war pins as well, Stats is going to be capable of continuing onwards with this aggression. GuMiho smartly sieging up the tanks in good positions. I mean, if he's going to be dropped in the main, he's still going to be able to deal with this, but there's an Immortal available, and Immortals are very good at dealing the damage to all of these units as well. Blink is just about to finish up, a very important upgrade. It's going to allow him to hopefully keep these units alive for a little while longer, but here we go. That siege tank is immediately shelling away at all of these units. Blink up into the main base. He's going to pick up that Immortal as well, but here we go. Target firing down that very first siege tank. It goes down in just a matter of seconds. Blink, of course, is gonna be very helpful here too, and so far, I mean, that Immortal, he's gotta be dealing the damage. There we go, another siege tank does get picked up in just a matter of seconds, and somehow, some way, Stats may very well be able to do this. All of the siege tanks are now gone, but there's still so many Marines available. SCV is actually now pulled off the line as well. They're already ready with the Embrace there on the low ground, preventing these Stalkers from continuing their micro. The Marines now on the high ground as well, dealing the damage, and GuMiho picks up game number 1 in a very dominant fashion. GuMiho was defending that really nicely there, but he still almost ended up going down there to the counterattack, right? It was really well done there by Stats as well, but GuMiho just simply showing him who's boss in game number 1, using all of that income that he gets out of the mules to his advantage to just simply power out the Marines. But as you may have noticed, right, there really wasn't a rush for, like, for example, Stimpack. There wasn't a rush for example, Combat Shield. Just sheer amount of units is what is absolutely critical right now in the Terran versus Protoss matchup. And here's the thing. Here's how I've heard a lot of Terran players describe Protoss versus Terran right now. If you're trying to play the Terran matchup, right, the Terran versus Protoss matchup, in a way that you are safe against everything that the Protoss player can throw at you, so both against, like, Oracle play, as well as, of course, you know, the Stalker aggression, as well as all of the other bits and pieces that the Protoss player can throw at you, you just sort of lose if the Terran player is gonna go up against a macro-focused style instead. So say Protoss is gonna go for a quick third base, you can't really go for a counterattack, and you're also not actually forced to defend against anything, so all of a sudden you find yourself at a disadvantage, economically speaking. We'll see if that's going to be part of this matchup right here as well, because so far, Stats did definitely get outplayed there in game number 1. I wonder if that means, though, that GuMiho is gonna, you know, play something a little bit differently here in game 2. I mean, if you're 1-0 ahead, usually that opens up a little bit of wiggle room, for example, to go for a for example, like a command center first, or maybe like a proxy starport. Definitely an option at this point as well. But I think that for now, we will just simply see GuMiho play a very standard, straightforward strategy. Command center now going down on that low ground after the barracks went up. And I think he's going to be going here for a, indeed, factory and then probably a reactor once again. Make the switcheroo, so he's going to be capable of defending against everything. Now, I did this in game number 1 as well. I actually quite like this. Look at that. Sending out the Marine on a bit of an expedition to scout if there's any proxy gateways up anywhere. Of course, proxy gateway is pretty terrifying for a Terran player to deal with, in particular if you put the command center on the low ground. But so far, GuMiho is mostly just playing this blindly, not sending out SCVs in the earlier part of the game to scout out what's going on. Instead, he's trying to play this safe, so he's not really going to take any damage. But I think he may very well be going for like a bunker. Yeah, there we go. Bunker is going to go down just because of the Stalker play in the earlier part of the game. And of course, since we are once again seeing that Stalker play, and we once again do see the Twilight Council follow-up as well, I think it's a smart move, in particular on Ascension to IRLE. This is a map that's a little bit more wide open there. Of course, the third base is still on the same level, I suppose, but in order to move up this ramp, and look at this nice little play here, GuMiho knows when that Stalker should be here. Due to this nice little ramp leading up and down, usually we see quite a bit of aggression that is indeed capable of getting pushed across the map on this map. But, you know, most of the time, though, this is a map that is going to be macro-focused, just because both players have a pretty easy time going for their third command centers and their Nexi accordingly, right? Anyway, very similar play here so far, though. by GuMiho. I mean, he's not really mixing this up whatsoever. Very quick Blink Stalker follow-up here, this time around from Stats. And he's actually putting all of these buildings in the corner here, all surrounding that single pylon, trying to make sure that his opponent cannot scout this one out whatsoever. Now also sending the probe inside of that main once again. This may have seemed like a bit of an interesting timing, but if the Terran player was to, like, for example, rush out a very quick medevac, that would have been the exact timing where he expected that one to fly across the map. So just checking the corners, making sure that nothing is hiding there. We do see the robotics facility now also coming in. So I think that Stats may be going for that quick War Prison play and potentially go for some pressure with, for example, the Stalkers. Stalkers, of course, definitely very potent. He's just going to continuously put down more and more pylons inside of the main so he knows exactly where the opponent is going to be pushing from. Speaking of which, though, we now see Hellions coming in. There are Stalkers here near the front, but I wouldn't be surprised if we see a very similar push here. Look at that, once again. 3 Marines loaded up into the medevac. We see 6 Hellions this time around, because neither of them or none of them ended up falling here. Immediately, Hellions are just simply going to bypass all of these Stalkers, and this is a build that Stats has not played, you know, like he's not prepared for this. He's not prepared for this whatsoever. I mean, while he's capable of cleaning up the main reasonably well, the Hellions are just simply gonna head right over there as well. And while Blink is gonna be done a little bit faster this time around, still so many probes end up going down in just a matter of seconds. Oh my god, man, that's sick. These SCV, or these probes rather, are in so much trouble. And once again, 15 end up going down. I mean, this opens up the opportunity here for the Protoss to go for the counterattack. And this time around, this is a really scary army though. I mean, we do see the siege tank just about to come out. Liberator is now also going to be joining this party very shortly. There's not a whole lot of defenses available for the Terran player just yet. And I wonder if maybe Terran did overextend just a little bit. 2 Marines apparently now valiantly dropped off inside of that main base. I think the medevac is going to try and just simply get on out of there. But at the exact same time, though, there's now Stalkers available here on the other side of the map. They're immediately blinking right on top of that siege tank. Stats mixing it up here in game 2. He's just simply accepting the fact that he's more than likely going to be losing some of these units. Liberator will get picked off right there as well. And at this point, I mean, the Stalkers are forced to go after these SCVs. Stats. He's okay with losing all of these probes because he can just simply go for the counterattack with that very quick Blink Stalker play. And apparently that allows him to clean up this match here, and he's going to be able to even up the score 1-1. That was actually a rather interesting play there by the Protoss player. I mean, I'm sure he didn't mean to lose 15 probes, right? But it didn't seem like he was really ready for that aggression once again. But while he did end up losing a lot of workers there, he just simply had so much available for the counterattack. I guess he must have realized after game 1 that Terran really was committing to that kind of push, and that Terran wouldn't really have a whole lot of defenses at home. And if you push a little bit faster, right, and there's no second or maybe even a third siege tank out, you're just going to be able to deal so much damage with the Blink Stalkers. And that brings us to Black Pink Alley, the 3rd map in this series, effectively now making this a best of 3, but there's definitely a little bit of a storyline here already. I wonder if either player is gonna mix it up. Wouldn't be surprised if Stats goes for a very similar build once again though. He's gonna go for that probe scout. Doesn't want to be caught with his pants down this time around. Maybe harass, you know, the SCV that's going to be building that command center on the low ground once again. So far, though, just simply sending that probe into the main base to make sure that he's going to be able to figure out exactly what it is he's got to go up against. Speaking of which, though, we do see indeed that quick refinery coming up here for GuMiho. He's gonna once again go for the barracks, but I wonder if he's gonna be changing up his build, because while he did a lot of economic damage, he just simply wasn't capable of holding that counterattack. And I mean, I think that both players now exactly know what it is they could be going up against, and I wouldn't be surprised if they're actually both gonna switch it up. And if one of them is gonna stick to a similar strategy, it is more than likely going to be the Protoss. We should be seeing that command center coming in here in just a second for the Terran player. Indeed, Protoss is going to go back just to confirm if that is going to be the case. There are indeed now 400 minerals available though, and indeed the command center does get dropped down there on the low ground once again. Very confident play here by GuMiho. I mean, for all he knows, right, he could be going up against proxy gateways once again. I mean, this is a pretty common build right now in the PvT meta. It's not gonna be quite the case, but Reactor is coming up on that barracks, and I wonder if we're going to be seeing the factory once again. This time around, I'm not seeing a factory just yet. He will be going for one here eventually, but it's a little bit of a different time. It's definitely not going to be meant to switch over to that reactor just yet, as I think that GuMiho is going to be producing 2 Marines here back to back for at least a little while. There we go. Stalker's coming out once again. Stats not really mixing it up here either. He's once again going to go for that robotics facility, but no Twilight Council nearly as quickly this time around like we saw in game number 2. He may just be simply going for a build similar to what we saw in game 1. Just a little bit of a different timing, I suppose, but he's not going to be going for nearly as many Stalkers this time around, nearly as quickly either. Just simply using them defensively, not taking any risks whatsoever, and making sure that he's going to be safe against whatever it is the Terran player wants to throw at him. And speaking of which, we do see another barracks now coming in. Tech Lab building here as well on that factory. Would not be surprised to see the switch up here in just a little bit. So we can indeed see that quick potential combat shield or maybe even stimp pack coming out already. And this may very well just be a very heavy bio-focused strategy from the Terran player. Twilight Council being built now at the front of the natural expansion as well for the Protoss. Stats is going to be switching though for that very quick observer, so he knows exactly what it is he's going up against once again. And this is looking to be like a bit of a tame build, right? Like neither player really taking any kind of risks whatsoever, just sending out their workers and their units across the map so they know what it is they're going up against, but playing it very safe and sound. I like this. This is usually the kind of game that I like watching and casting the most, when both players are playing very, very careful and they're just trying to go for that big, aggressive push. It does look like, though, GuMiho has decided to leave that tech lab on the factory and is going to be producing siege tanks right here instead. And he's really powering out those Marines. Look at that. It's so different. You used to be able to go for that very quick stim pack and combat shield, but apparently Terran players have now decided that they don't even have time to build the tech lab. They want to continuously pump out those Marines just in case it's going to be a big aggressive push here from their Protoss opponent. Now, so far, it's been pretty passive, though, for Protoss. I mean, Protoss has barely done any kind of pressure whatsoever. I mean, he's really done nothing. I mean, he sent a single probe across the map, but that's about it. We now also do indeed see the Blink Stalker follow-up as well as the double forge, but this scout right here was very important. Protoss just saw that indeed 2 siege tanks are moving across the map, and this is a map that can be a little bit annoying. I mean, you can, for example, siege up tanks over there and still hit the assimilator. That is something that we have to keep in mind. A single shield battery now coming in as well. Blink is not going to be done just yet. This observer will confirm where this Terran army is located, and this is still a big amount of units. These Stalkers are primarily here just to try and slow this one down. GuMiho, however, a little bit too good to immediately siege up those tanks and panic in these kind of scenarios. Siege tanks, of course, still extremely powerful as well, but right now these Stalkers are at a bit of a weird angle. They're going to be caught off guard. Marines moving near the front of this base now as well. That siege tank dealing a solid amount of damage already, but the shield battery right there is going to be very helpful. Stalkers now moving in from the back. They're going to be able to clean up one of these tanks very rapidly. Second one will also end up going down very quickly. And now all of a sudden, I think that Protoss has managed to clean this one up decently well. Couple of the Marines are now going down as well. Both players trying to micro 2 fights at once. This Stalker, I think, will be going down there in the nick of time as well. But Protoss managed to hold on with only 4 probes going down. Nice little play, though, because there's no denying that GuMiho used this time to even up the economy, right? He's going to be following it up with more and more barracks, and obviously Stats knows exactly what it is he's going up against as well. Now we finally do see that transition towards both stim pack as well as combat shield, but you know, he used that time to even up the worker count, and all of a sudden GuMiho has got a very solid amount of income. He might even be looking to go for a 3rd command center here in just a little bit, or he could of course be pushing right when these 2 upgrades finish up. Speaking of 3rd command centers, though, we do indeed now see the 3rd nexus coming in for Stats. He's going to be building that right at the 3rd nexus location, so he can start mining from that in just a little bit. Couple more gateways now coming in as well, and while he did build the double forge, he's not quite going for the double upgrade just yet, because he knows he could be going up against a little bit of aggression in just a little bit. This is going to be a big push, though. I mean, we see the lining up right here. of both combat shield as well as infantry weapons +1. That is something that could deal a lot of damage, and if Terran wanted to go for a push, I think in just about a minute or so would be the perfect time for exactly that. Look at the production here. Look at the shoveling between all of the add-ons. I always really like the way that professional Terran players do that, trying to make the most out of the add-ons and making sure that they are, you know, not getting them on the wrong buildings and that they're optimizing their production time. It's pretty cool to see. Charge now coming in as well for Protoss. He's going to be going for that very standard Archon Immortal kind of style. Or rather, Archon Immortal and probably some Zealots here in just a little bit as well. Ooh, actually, these Stalkers are going to be able to pick up one of the Siege Tanks for essentially free. A couple of the Marines are trying to intercept these as well. And they're going to be able to get one or two, yeah, there we go, two Stalkers for their troubles as well. Look at those corpses apparently just rolling around. I think that 2 Stalkers, though, for a Siege Tank is exactly what the Protoss is looking for, but this is going to be a tough push to hold, because there's still a lot of Terran units moving across the map. It's now Marines and Marauders. Blink Stalker Micro is going to be crucial, as will the Force Fields be. No shield batteries just yet here for the Protoss player. He does have a lot of powerful units, though. These observers, of course, scouting out roughly where it is the army is located. But look at it. Everything will be loaded up into medevacs, and the observer does not quite see this. Medevacs are now heading into the main base. Now, there are 3 Stalkers waiting for this shenanigans already. Brilliant play there by Stats, though. Definitely making the most out of this scenario. A single reinforcing Marauder will get picked up as well, but more and more Stalkers are indeed now split off to continuously try sniping this aggression. Still, the majority of the Protoss army is now at the 3rd base. Blink Stalkers will indeed be able to blink right underneath all of these medevacs. They're going to be able to pick up one of them, but there's still a lot of Terran units left over. Protoss immediately now boxing all of his units towards that main base as well. 10 probes go down in just a matter of seconds. 2 reinforcing medevacs, however, now arriving on the other side of the map, and they're going to be harassing that 3rd base at the exact same time as the army is inside of the main. Blink forward once again, though, does manage to pick up one of the medevacs, and while 21 probes end up going down, GuMiho is not done with this aggression just yet. He's going to continuously drop his opponent here, trying to make the most out of this scenario, really dealing a lot of damage, but the Stalkers are coming in, and he's once again forced to get on out of there. But 26 probes ended up going down, and GuMiho, while that went down as well, got himself a 3rd command center that he's now morphing into an orbital command. He's going to be going for the follow-up here, and this is really well played by GuMiho. He's going to be going for the follow-up of more and more Marines, Marauders, and then, of course, also probably Siege Tanks. I mean, judging by the fact that he's already got himself that armory, he could just be going for the +2 upgrades as well, just simply sticking on a single engineering bay for now. Couple of Widow Mines coming in here as well. That's rather interesting. Of course, we did recently see the reduction of the build time on these Widow Mines. That makes them a whole lot more potent, but they are now, you know, you can now at the very least see the Widow Mines once they are trying to reload their charge, which is a very big deal. Stats now, however, moving across the map. There's a massive Terran army also now at the 3rd base of the Protoss player. And while indeed players are forced to micro at 2 ends of the map once again, and we do now also see a medevac coming in into the main base here of the Protoss player. Protoss is still dealing a lot of damage here at the 3rd. The aggression at the 3rd of the Protoss has also been deflected, although it does look like Terran is going to try and head towards the main. Reinforcements, though, eventually do come in, and while 12 Terran SCVs ended up going down here, GuMiho is holding on so far, but he's definitely going up against the Protoss that's crawling his way back into this match. Look at this high-level play, though. It's so sick. Like, players get so good at all of these multi-pronged harassments that even for me, someone who's observing the game, it's hard to follow all of the little engagements that are indeed happening and all of the little bits of micro that are going down at the exact same time. Zealots now trying to charge forward against concussive shells. Pretty tricky thing to do. There's still Widow Mines here as well, burrowed underground. Protoss may very well be overextending, though. This is a very tricky call to make. Reinforcement Stalkers are now coming in, but Terran has got a very menacing force here. Going for the double upgrades right now as well is GuMiho. I quite like that decision, but still, Protoss is looking to deal the damage here towards that 3rd command center, and he's already doing a pretty solid job at exactly that, but there's so much Terran, though, available. He's got to be careful. Force fields can be absolutely shutting this fight down very, very rapidly. But now with the Liberators being produced 2 by 2 as well, the longer that this goes on, the more in favor of the Terran player this will be. And I think that Protoss will be forced to retreat here in just a little bit. There are now Archons also available with this army composition. I'm actually quite surprised how late he decided to go for the Archon switch. Archon Immortal, of course, very, very good. It's capable of essentially powering through everything. More and more High Templar now joining this fight as well, and they will immediately be joining forces together to become an Archon as well. And this is still an army, apparently, that Stats wants to commit with. It is such a tricky decision, though, to make, because these Liberators, they are capable of cleaning this army up so very rapidly. And here we go. Apparently, Protoss has found an angle. This is the fight that he wants to take. There's a lot of Protoss available, though. 116 supply here in total for the Protoss versus 150 almost for the Terran player. Protoss, apparently, though, wants to be moving up that ramp there towards the natural. A little bit of an indecisive play there, and a little bit of an indecisive maneuver by the Protoss player, trying to make the most of the scenario, but eventually he does want to deal with the Protoss with the Terran army here first. He's gonna target fire down these Liberators. They will eventually end up falling. All of the Terran SUVs are now also forced off the line, but still, there's a lot of army supply available here for the Protoss player. He's gonna continuously push across the map here. 2 Medevacs now in the meantime as well, trying to deal some damage here, but is this split off of army maybe a little bit too greedy? I guess we will find out in just a little bit. Nice little bit of pickup micro once again, though, by the Protoss player. Try to keep all of these units alive to the best of his abilities. Blink Stalker forward as well, but I think that there's just a little bit too much Terran, because while this is all going on, a massive amount of damage is being done by the double Medevac drop, and GuMiho wins game number 3. That previous game, though, is exactly what I mean. I mean, sometimes I look at a match of professional SC2 and I think, I can probably do that. You know, if I practice hard enough, I can probably do that. That previous match, though, that's a perfect example of where players are quite literally microing 3 engagements at once, while they are also macroing and expanding at the exact same time. I mean, if you've ever played StarCraft 2, you know exactly how incredibly hard that is to execute. And we've finally gotten to a point in SC2 after it's been, you know, it's been about 8 years since it first came out, right? A little bit less than that, about 7.5 years. It's been a long time since it first came out, and we're now arriving at a point where I look at a game and I'm like, well, there's just no way. I mean, I can practice as hard as I want, but there's absolutely no way that I can be as fast, as precise, and as good as these players are right here. I absolutely love it. It's so incredible. It makes me excited for the future of SC2 as well, because where are we going to be in, like, you know, another 2-3 years from now? That's kind of what we saw in StarCraft 1 as well, right? I mean, in StarCraft 1, players have been practicing for nearly, like, 20 years at this point. And obviously, eventually, new pro gamers came around because, you know, the retirement age for pro gamers is usually, like, 27, 28 at the very most, just because, you know, their hands and their fingers will not be capable of moving fast enough anymore. It's actually kind of insane how early pro gamers tend to retire just because they get overtaken by the younger guys instead. But it's pretty exciting, though, to see what, like, the next generation of SC2 pro gamers is going to look like, because players are getting so extremely fast. There are actually, there's actually some up-and-coming players right now in both Europe as well as Korea that are looking really good. I'm in particular thinking of guys like, for example, Clem, as well as Raynor in Europe. I mean, they are so good. They're French and Italian players that are, I believe both of them are 15 years old right now. They're on professional teams. They've been around for a couple of years, and they're getting better and better and better. It's going to be exciting to see where they are going to be in a couple of years from now. It's like, you know, the old dogs being like 26 years old as they are forced to retire in like 2 years just because they can't keep up. And of course, in South Korea as well, there's like this mandatory army that you do have to be part of. I believe for like 2 or 3 years. I'm not entirely sure, but usually once the pro gamers in South Korea end up retiring, they decide to join the army, and once they get out of the army, they may very well have to get like another job or a regular job, just because if you're, you know, if you're out of the pro gaming life for a couple of years, it will be very tricky to try to transition back to that. But some of them join back in professional gaming teams as, for example, like a coach, or, you know, they become like commentators themselves, or they start being part of like the scene on television and all these kinds of things instead. But usually, pro gaming careers will indeed end before the age of 30. At the very least in StarCraft 2, right? I've actually seen a lot of them like transition towards games like, for example, poker, which is pretty interesting. Obviously, poker does still have that mental aspect, and you know, it's pretty similar when it comes to like practice sessions as well as StarCraft 2. A lot of gamers indeed making that transition towards either other games that are a little bit less mechanically demanding, like for example Hearthstone as well. A lot of players are transitioning towards that, but it's pretty fascinating though to assume that at like age 30 you are done for in professional SC2. Players are you know, just simply getting outshined by the young guys who can easily APM 500 actions a minute. It's pretty wild. Anyway, let's talk about the game before I blabber on about unrelated things for a while, because I tend to do that. But anyways, we do have a bunch of gateways once again coming in here for stats. This looks like the game that he played in yeah, this looks exactly like the build that he played in game 2. This time around though, GuMiho scouts what's going on, and that's a big deal. He's even going to be able to get... No, it does look like he was going to be able to get a pylon there for his troubles. Would just barely be able to... Nope, not get out of there. The jetpack raider apparently can't just simply fly down that ramp immediately. He has to take a little bit of a step in between there. But it does mean that GuMiho knows... this does mean, rather, that GuMiho knows exactly what it is he's going up against. And he's going to be transitioning once again towards the reactor here on that factory. And I would not be surprised to see him switch that reactor out in just a little bit and go for example, the barracks. Or he could be going for some Widow Mine play here as well. Looks like we may actually be setting up for a bit of a macro-focused game, though. I mean, look at that. Stats is going to be transitioning towards the double fort here near the front. He's even already putting down a pylon here at the 3rd base location. It's kind of interesting, right? There's a bit of a mind game going on right here, I think, because he knows, so Protoss knows that Terran scouted out exactly what it is he's going up against. Thus, he's no longer really committing to this build, and instead he's just transitioning towards a quicker 3rd and then the double fort, because he knows that his opponent is not going to make the push that he had in mind either, because there's going to be a lot of Blink Stalkers available. It's a bit of a mind game and a back and forth, where you're making a lot of assumptions. Once again, going back to that Protoss, or rather that poker argument, where we do indeed see players transitioning towards those mind games as well. It's pretty similar, but still, these Stalkers can deal a lot of damage. There's a Cyclone, however, available, and Cyclones, of course, are very good when it comes to dealing the damage here. That SCV is just simply going to repair up the bunker back to full HP. There we go. And I wouldn't be surprised that that Cyclone will be getting a little bit of a fix-up right here in just a second as well. Look at that. Just getting a bit of a touch-up. Not quite getting a paint job, although I can do that manually if I would really want to, by changing the colors of the game. But indeed, the Cyclone will be back at full HP in just a little bit. +1 infantry weapons now coming in as well. We do see Stimpack finishing up. Nice little spot there by GuMiho. Will be able to scout out exactly what it is he's going up against. Liberator was indeed flown across the map. I did not quite manage to catch that, but apparently it is now returned with only a handful of life remaining. And while he was indeed across the map, he didn't pick up any SCV kills or any probe kills at all, just because the Liberator indeed has 0 kills next to his name. 3rd Nexus is now coming in here for the Protoss though, and this has actually been a rather passive game. Stalkers are still across the map. Apparently 2 medevacs are now trying to set up the surround. This could actually be a little bit cheeky. Look at this. He's gonna try and intercept the retreating Stalkers. He's gonna try and intercept the retreating Stalkers. This is such a cute little move. Apparently those stats a little bit too good for that. He sniffs out that something is not quite right, and he will indeed be meeting up with the Terran army there eventually. Just simply moving towards the bottom left-hand corner. That is such a high-level move as well, right? It's so subtle, but if I was the Protoss there, I would have been like, okay, Terran units are coming in, retreat back to home, right? And instead, Stats looks at that and he's like, well, something's not quite right there. That is not enough Terran army units to justify that little move out. There must be 2 medevacs somewhere else, or at the very least some units, trying to set up the surround. Beautiful little play there by Stats. Even though it didn't look very critical whatsoever, losing these Stalkers would probably be the end of the game. And speaking of which, he's got to be careful. Almost ends up losing all of them nonetheless. But Blink is going to be available just in the nick of time. Charge is now also available. We see the Warp Prism coming out here after that Immortal starts waddling across the map. 3rd Command Center only just now starting up, and GuMiho does indeed, he needs to do some damage here. I mean, he needs to do some damage. There's a lot of Protoss army here available, however, already. Nice little bit of pickup micro once again, and instead of just simply fighting on the Nexus, Protoss wants to meet this Terran army in the middle of the map, and there are indeed so many Protoss units available. These siege tanks really not capable of sieging up whatsoever. Does manage to get a decent amount of the Protoss units right here here is GuMiho. He's going to try and gun down as many of these units as he possibly can. Marines, of course, still very, very nice. A lot of these Stalkers are at low HP, and all of a sudden, we see GuMiho cleaning up the majority of these units, and he's smelling blood. He wants to go across the map right now and potentially close out this match right here, right now. Of course, GuMiho is currently on match point. If he ends up winning this game, he ends up winning the entirety of this best of 5 series as well. Stats, though, trying to play this smartly. Look at this. He's going to send out the Warp Prism. And this actually forces a stim as well as just simply slows down the push here from the Terran player. Warp Prism is still going to try and just simply move across the map throughout the outer edges. And while Terran is now scanning ahead and indeed will confirm that there's not a whole lot of Protoss available, this Warp Prism bought the Terran, or bought the Protoss player a little bit of precious time. He may even be going for a Warp in, right? And that can deal a lot of damage as well. Terran now apparently though wants to move towards the natural instead, knowing that most of the Terran, or most of his opposing units are going to be at that third base location. They're going to be going for the surround. Terran Marines now once again stimming backwards, trying to see if they can deal some damage. The Zealots immediately charging forward though, and one of these siege tanks will get picked up in just a matter of seconds. Once again though, GuMiho is starting to deal a lot of damage, and this is a bit of a weird angle because right now they are indeed surrounded by units all across the map. GuMiho though still microing forward, trying to push towards that Protoss natural. I wonder if he's overextending though, because there's still a lot of warped in units continuously available as well. Immortals indeed powering through all of these siege tanks very rapidly. The Liberators going down in just a matter of seconds, and I think that Stats managed to hold here just barely in the nick of time, as Terran wanted to close out the game right then and there. At the same time though, Blink Stalkers now coming in here at the third base location. They're gonna go after the workers here that are desperately trying to collect all of these minerals, and this all of a sudden means that Stats has picked up the army supply lead. He's gonna be able to pick up one of these siege tanks as well. That was one of the most important units there for the defense here for the Terran player. SCVs moved off the line, and while Terran was significantly ahead just about a minute or so ago, Stats saw an opportunity, he jumped at the chance, and he ended up obtaining the victory, bringing us to Game 5. Well, there we have it. The final match of this series will be on Neon Violet Square. Spawning in the top left corner of the map and playing with the red Protoss probes, we have none other than Stats, playing a brilliant series so far, but I can't help but feel that he has been in a little bit of trouble. And he's mostly, like, for example, that last game, right? That was mostly just won because his opponent made a little bit of a mistake there, overextended, and he managed to crawl his way back. It's gonna be a tough game for him to win because his opponent, spawning in the opposite corner, is playing with the blue Terran SCVs, and he goes by the nickname of GuMiho. Very impressed with the way that GuMiho is playing this so far though. I mean, you can already see, right? I mentioned it briefly earlier on into this series that Terran was definitely struggling a little bit in the Terran versus Protoss matchup. Terran seems to have found a way of dealing with their Protoss opponents at the very least reasonably well. And right now, we are in what is the last match of this series. No matter what, this has essentially been reduced now to a best of 1. Just a single match to determine who's going to be the victor of this best of 5 series. Neither player though really going for any kind of super aggressive cheese in this series so far. I'd be surprised to see something like that in Game 5. We have seen players do that in the past as well. I mean, players like, for example, Life. I mean, can we still talk about him? I mean, he turned out to be a cheater, right, in the end. But players like, for example, Life were very well known for still going for like a 12 pool at the very last match of like a $100,000 tournament. He would literally just put all of his eggs in one basket and go for like the most aggressive possible build as a Zerg player against his opponent, which made him so unpredictable in grand finals just because he was not afraid to pull that off. Most players, however, they do tend to go for a very safe build instead and just play to their strengths, and since most of the top of the line players consider their strength to be macro and just simply long drawn out games, playing that defensive style is usually what they will be defaulting to as well. And it looks like for both players here, we see something along those lines coming down as well. I mean, Stats, once again, going for that Cybercore after the very quick Nexus going down on the low ground there as well. Once again, double assimilator here inside of that main base, and we'll have to keep an eye out on exactly what it is that he wants to go for. But judging by that Chrono Boost, and he did this in a couple of games so far, I would not be surprised if we see more and more Stalkers coming in just a little bit. Apparently, this time around, we see the Twilight Council. No second Stalker just yet, actually. Just the Chrono Boost, apparently, to deal with the very first Reaper there. And there, indeed, eventually, we do see the second Stalker now queuing up as well. GuMiho, in this particular match, though, decides to go for the Reaper. It's still a potential opener that you can go for. It's just a little bit risky. Sometimes if you're going up against something really cheesy, right, it's easier for you to just simply not open up with the Reaper and instead go for the Marine. For example, if you're going to go up against Proxy Stargate, right, going for the Reaper is fine because you'll be able to realize that it's coming your way, but then you won't actually be able to defend against it. So usually, even if you don't know what it is you're going up against, it may be better to go for like a Marine opener just in case. GuMiho though does indeed decide to go for this Reaper, and he's scouting all over the map, trying to check all of the proxyable locations. Look at that. Just simply sending it all over the bottom left-hand corner of the map, so he knows if there's a building going down there for his opponent, he figures out where it's going to be located. Now, of course, we know at this point that it's not going to be the case. Instead, we see the Blink Stalkers once again coming out here for stats. There's actually a bit of an interesting position there for that Stalker. It may actually be forced to walk all the way around. Sometimes Stalkers get stuck at this point in the game, although I'm sure that Stats has tried these positions here before, and he knows that this Stalker will still be able to leave the gateway. But I'm always a little bit hesitant of putting down my buildings just like that, because getting a Stalker stuck at this point in the game would be pretty bad. But there we go. It is indeed going to be moving around. Robotics facility now coming in as well, and this time around, look at that. GuMiho is making a bit of a change. He's gonna be going for the Raven opener. Now the Raven, of course, very nice at detecting things, very nice at shutting down little bits of aggression as well. It is a bit of a tricky unit to use though, and we haven't really seen the full potential of it just yet. It's got abilities like, for example, the interference matrix. It's got the anti-armor missile as well as the repair drone. All of these three abilities are very helpful, but only in very specific scenarios. Plus, the Raven actually needs a lot of babysitting. Now, they recently received some minor buffs that should make it hopefully a little bit easier to control. Like, for example, the interference matrix. It's now got a little bit. It's got a little bit more room and a little bit more range to get thrown out at, which definitely will make it a bit more powerful. But Ravens are expensive. If you miss micro, you definitely lose it in just a matter of seconds, and it does mean that you have to be babysitting it continuously. And so far, we haven't really seen a lot of Terran players focusing on the Raven just yet. Although I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of the late game armies in particular will be having like 1 or 2, maybe 3 Ravens out, just because it's going to be very, very helpful. I actually think that's the correct way of having spellcaster units in this game. I would love it if like a maxed out Zerg army, for example, would contain like 3 Infestors, 3 Vipers, and like 3 Queens. You know, just have spellcasters be an additional benefit to your army, rather than like, you know, the majority of your army, right? If a player is playing like 16 Medivacs, it's a little bit silly. I'm not a particularly big fan of those kind of scenarios. I would much rather like to see spellcasters being used as a specialty kind of unit that just makes your existing army stronger rather than being an army on its own. Regardless though, look at this little bit of a path blocker. It always looks so funny to me. Stalkers are going to be able to make their way across the map. They do not have Blink available as well. There's no Stalkers, or there's no Stimpack available for the Terran player just yet. Siege tanks, however, are going to be pretty good here. There's a siege tank in the main base. There's also one right there on the natural. And apparently, while the Stalkers indeed are going to make their way towards that high ground, I actually didn't see that siege tank right there next to the gas. So far, though, Terran is going to be able to deflect this very, very easily. And we may actually be setting up for what seems to be a bit of a macro game. Third Nexus is now also already up and done here for stats. He's going to be able to micro from this base and continue getting his income as well. He's now also going for the double upgrades. So judging by the setup, I don't think Stats really wants to go for a push anytime soon. Wouldn't be surprised if he's just going to continuously add on more and more units here and just slowly go for a maxed out army. We'll have to see if he goes for the double upgrades once again. Yeah, there we go. Double upgrades once again. And essentially when you are indeed like investing like 600-700 minerals and gas in total, 600-700 resources to go for double upgrades, usually you don't really want to push across the map all too much. And Stats is now just confirming as well with a Phoenix, with a hallucinated Phoenix at that, of course, that he is indeed going up against a Terran player that's playing a macro-focused style as well. GuMiho did end up once again, right, sending a group of Marines out to confirm that there is no cheeky expansion hiding in the corners of the map. I'm quite surprised that he's so deliberate with checking the bottom left-hand corner, but then not actually checking the top right. You would imagine that, you know, if he's so worried about proxy bases and proxy buildings and whatnot, that he would like to know about the bases as well in the top right-hand corner, but apparently he feels comfortable doing exactly what it is he's got going on so far. A couple of these observers now actually in surveillance mode as well, but it looks like we may see a bit of an engagement here as the Stalkers are going to be able to pick up one of those medevacs, and while apparently 8 of those Marines managed to make the cut, these ones apparently will just simply, you know, use their combat drugs. They're going to be able to maybe gun down one Zealot, but not even that is going to be enough, as every single last one of these gets slain in just a little bit of time. It's interesting though. GuMiho is already going up against the Protoss, who's got the 4th Nexus coming in. Only at this point in time do we see the 3rd base about halfway done here for the Terran. And this is what I mean, right? If you're trying to play safe against everything that the Terran or that the Protoss player can throw at you, you gotta start falling behind in economy very fast. Now, we do indeed see this base in the bottom right-hand corner. I guess this would technically be then the 4th command center, which is fine and dandy. It's just that, I mean, I wonder if you can even really consider this base to be a proper mining base. It's only got 4 mineral patches, and while it's technically the 4th command center, you're just simply gonna lose out on so much potential income if you do, you know, if you do decide to go for that one over there. I'm never quite sure if I like it very much when players take this one in the bottom right or the top left-hand corner. It's nice as like a 5th base, maybe a 6th. But you just simply lose out on so much potential income. And on top of that, mules, of course, are going to be rapidly out-mining this base in just probably about 6, 7, 8 minutes. That base will be gone for sure. GuMiho now does have the army available, though. He's going to send one hero marine down the ramp. It will indeed die, but not for, you know, no particular reason. It found out that it is indeed going to be a bit of a setup right there for the Protoss to deal with. So the Protoss is going to try and keep an eye out here on what it is the Terran wants to go for. Make sure that that expansion on the low ground does not get taken, but we do now see the command center here near the northern end of the natural expansion morphed into a planetary fortress, and GuMiho is indeed going to be playing a pretty defensive style. Whew. Nice little play there actually by the Raven, preventing this War Prism now from using its ability, as well as unloading these High Templar. That's actually a pretty cool spell, right? So it prevents these units from unloading, and it also prevents the units from warping in. I mean, it doesn't last forever, obviously, so the Stalkers, or rather the High Templar, are once again going to be able to get dropped out of this War Prism. But this is going to be some very interesting back and forth micro. As a matter of fact, we now see missile turrets coming in as well, but this planetary fortress is going to be very tricky to break. Stats just realized it as well. He sees the position that he has to fight against. I don't think he really wants to commit to that, even with now a sensor tower also going down, and there's one in the main base too. GuMiho knows exactly where his opponent's army is moving out across the map. Still though, Stats is now also getting to a point where he's got a, you know, a maxed out army. He's already actually fully maxed out right now off of 73 workers, 71 Terran SCVs here in total, but both players, right, are, you know, just playing very, very safe, very safe and sound. They're not really taking any risks whatsoever. +3/+3 coming in here for GuMiho. We see +3/+3 now also coming in here for the Protoss player. So Stats is going to be able to max out in upgrades in just a second, and I wonder if this will trigger him to maybe go for a little bit of a push, because he's actually about a minute or so earlier in these upgrades, or with these upgrades, than his opponent. That's confirming whether or not there's a gold base down just yet. Indeed, that is not going to be the case. It's just that pushing into this sieged up position of the Terran is going to be so very difficult to do if you are the Protoss player. And because of that, we do see the fleet beacon coming in. There's a couple of Stargates now also coming up here for the Protoss, so I think that he may be going for like potential like Tempest or maybe even carrier switches in just a second, so he can deal with these units from afar, because fighting this very much so anti-ground based army for the Protoss or for the Terran player is going to be a very difficult thing to do. Actually, the first unit that now gets built out of the Stargate is going to be an Oracle. Obviously, Protoss did indeed give up a couple of units there just to try and, you know, save some of that supply. He doesn't really want to necessarily give up those units, but he does need to open up a little bit of supply count so he can actually continuously make more and more units. And indeed, the carriers now get queued up here for the Protoss. So the carriers take about 4.5 years to build. We'll have to wait until they do indeed finish up. Smart Servo is now even available here for GuMiho. This allows him to transform his Hellions and Hellbats as well as his Vikings and whatnot from that ground-based unit or into the other version of the unit a little bit faster. That means that they're going to be able to, for example, harass a little bit more efficiently, but while worker kills are nice at this point, it's not that big of a deal. GuMiho, however, ooh, look at that. Those storms are massive. is now indeed forced to retreat that low ground. There's absolutely no way that command center will finish up. And indeed, GuMiho is just simply going to rebuild it once again on the high ground, putting it even like a little bit outside of the base. It almost looks like a little bit of a taunt, right? Anyway, so many command centers are now done though. Look at this. GuMiho has gotten to the point where he almost wants to lose a couple of the Terran SCVs. Now at this point though, he does know that he's going to go up against carriers. I wonder what the transition for the Terran player is going to be. 3-3 did just finish up. He's now also going for more and more upgrades here for his armory-based units. And I think for now, he's just going to simply focus on primarily Hellions and then also Marines as well. Of course, this is an army that can deal with carriers, but it's just that the High Templar deals so much damage. He's going to be able to deal with some of them, and while a couple of the Marauders apparently do end up getting stormed as well, there's not that many storms available anymore. Only 5 High Templar here in total. GuMiho is going to start maneuvering across the map. He wants to make sure that these siege tanks are in proper positions to potentially take this one out. No starport additions just yet though for the Terran, so he doesn't want to go for the Viking plate just yet. This is still a very difficult move to make. Look at these target firings as well actually on those siege tanks, just simply dealing so much damage. We need to see feedback even coming down here on these High Templar, but look at this. I mean, the carriers are now available. I don't really see exactly how the Terran player wants to engage into this position, right? I mean, he may be able to pick up the base here in the low ground, but this one is, you know, not even that crucial anymore. Protoss is taking bases all over the bottom left-hand corner of this map already as well. I'm just a little bit worried for what will happen here once we eventually do see the Protoss max out on a lot of these Stargate-based units. Terran so far just simply sticking to what he knows though. Just going for the bio, switching towards the, you know, the Thors right now. Which is going to be pretty interesting. Thors, of course, very, very good at dealing the damage. He's going to be able to move these siege tanks right now in range of all of these photon cannons as well. And I think that shortly we will see these units going down. And probably indeed the probes evacuated on out of there. So indeed stats will be going for, you know, the sacrificial base there. At the same time, he may be going for a bit of a counterattack. GuMiho now scans and realizes where that Terran or where that Protoss army is going to be located, and I think that stats will indeed be forced to just simply give up this base. Both players though are maxed out. More and more command centers are now taken all over the map. GuMiho is going to ramp up that mining quite a bit. Mules, of course, are very, very nice, but look at the amount. Oh man, this is going to be really scary, right? Look at the amount of storms that are available here. Stats is doing a magnificent job just simply slow playing this shenanigans. He's still gonna go up against a pretty menacing Terran bio bull, right? And apparently the majority of the Protoss army is now caught across the map as well. They're gonna try and see if they can intercept some of these reinforcements, maybe even get some of these medevacs as well. Still, there are so many carriers available, and carriers just continuously remake all of their interceptors. Now, of course, though, the Marines are capable of gunning down the interceptors very rapidly as well, in particular with 3-3. But still, more and more units are going down, and at this point, GuMiho does not seem to be in a position where he's capable of retreating. Apparently, though, Terran player is now leaving alone the majority of these siege tanks. All of the carriers are not going to be able to go after them pretty easily, and this does open up the opportunity as well for the majority of the Protoss ground army to intercept all of these units. A lot of the probes do end up falling though, but I think that these are the last seconds for this Terran army, as indeed they will be committing towards fighting all of these probes. 22 end up dying in just a matter of seconds, but there's still a lot of Protoss army to deal with. Carriers are still coming out, more and more probes are also being produced, but yeah, actually, I thought that fight wasn't going to go very well for the Terran player at all. But there's no denying that Terran is still mining very, very heavily here. He's now transitioning towards a Marine Liberator and even a Ghost-based army with a lot of those stores on the ground as well. I think that Protoss wants to go for a counterattack at this point, but it's going to be difficult to do so with all of these Marines and Marauders continuously moving across the map. I like this. GuMiho actually just simply sacrificing a bunch of his army to buy time and remake an army that's going to be significantly better at dealing with all of these air-based units. I mean, obviously, you can just simply go for the standard Javelin rockets on the Thor, or you can go for the high impact as well if you are in range. Of course, now with that smart servos upgrade, he's going to be able to switch between these modes very rapidly. So if the carriers overextend, then they lose their interceptors. He can very quickly switch towards the high impact and deal a substantial amount of damage. The most important mining bases now, though, for the Protoss are in the bottom left-hand corner of the map. There's really not that much mining here anymore for the Protoss. At the same time, another command center is now taken in the top right corner, and this one will be morphed into a planetary fortress as well. Here's the thing, Stats does have a menacing force, and the majority of it is going to be able to counterattack very easily. Mass recall and whatnot become very important at this point in the game, and we now also see the Nexus producing a mothership. Stats is now actually pushing across the map here with the carriers inside of the main base, and I actually like this decision making a lot. Gonna be able to pick up that Thor very easily, but at the same time he's also pushing in the top right corner to try and potentially deal with all of these command centers that are trying to morph into planetaries, and there we go, he does manage to get another one. GuMiho, though, is using this time to go for the counterattack, so he's sacrificing the entirety of the main base. There's a lot of ghosts available. They're going to be able to snipe and EMP these units down very, very efficiently, but at the same time, GuMiho is going to be able to pick up one of the last mining bases here for the Protoss player in red. Stats now also maneuvering towards the base here that is currently charged up with a planetary fortress. Of course, they're going to be able to deal a lot of damage, but there's still these ghosts available, though, that are also dealing the damage there, and they are actually capable of pushing this Protoss army away. While this is going on, though, GuMiho is still pushing into the bottom left-hand corner of the map as well. Stats is indeed losing a lot of his income, and there's really not that much mining here anymore for our Protoss player. Terran is still heavily mining here off of a lot of bases, but he's still forced to deal with a very scary Terran, or a very scary Protoss army as well. And these carriers, there's definitely no denying that they're going to be able to continuously just re-max on all of these interceptors. And I think that Stats may just have an army that's too much for the... Like, look at this, right? Another command center falls, and I think that this just may be too much for the Terran player to deal with. I mean, the army supply counts are not lying. Stats has got a very scary force, and while indeed these probes are no longer bringing in the minerals with their shiny beaks full of patches, there's really no mining anymore for the Protoss, but he's got an army that's going to be hard to beat. Finally, it's also once again grouped up together. These probes are now even joining this army as well, so hopefully they can soak up some of the damage. 34 Terran SCVs end up dying in just a matter of seconds, though, and I think that we are just about to see the final clash between these two titans in their respective races. Although I say that, and Stats, of course, goes for the mass recall, and just simply wants to take this engagement a little while later. Ideally so on his side of the map. Carriers now, of course, once again rebuilding their interceptors. But look at this. This is buying a lot of time for these interceptors to come out. There's still so much Protoss here available. SCVs are now also pushed across the map. Thors are capable of killing these units very rapidly as well, though. There's now also a mothership available. He may have actually wanted to go for that offensive recall, but cloaking these units is just going to make this so much more difficult as well. Interceptors, though, can go down in just a matter of seconds. I actually wouldn't mind it at all if the probes are now also forced to join in this engagement. But here we go. The final engagement of this best of 5 series. I don't see how the Terran player can properly deal with all of these units, though, because look at the amount of Protoss that is currently available. Scans going down continuously, trying to reveal as much of this Protoss ball underneath that mothership as possible. But with the amount of carriers available here, Stats eventually ends up obtaining the victory in this best of 5 series very, very nicely. Although GuMiho most definitely gave him a run for his money. What an awesome series. I hope you enjoyed watching it as well. If you did and you're new to the channel, make sure you hit that subscribe button so you get a notification as soon as future videos go live as well. Other than that, though, I want to thank you for watching. Have an amazing day. Do not forget to smile, alright? A special shout out to the Patreon supporters. Thank you guys for making these videos possible, but I will see you all in the next one.